from Chicago, and in the studio with me is Ben Joravsky. He is he's the guy who follows me here on WCPT. And so Ben, tell us about yourself.
All right. Well, first of all, Tom,
I love your voice, by the way. I wish I had your voice.
All right, well,
what a radio voice.
Switch for a day there. So anyway, I do the show that runs in Chicago from 2 to 5 Chicago time on WCPT 820 AM, and it's a local show. So I delve a lot into Chicago politics, which is my utter obsession. I could talk about Chicago politics all day, Tom. I'm going to restrain myself for your show here. But we also do some Trump talk. You can't avoid Trump talk in talk radio.
Sure.
And for about 452 years, I've been a political columnist for the Chicago Reader newspaper here in Chicago.
Yeah.
Where I
have some of your articles here.
Yeah, some of my recent ones, where I also indulge my obsession with Chicago politics. So that's.
So let's talk Chicago politics. I mean, it's in many ways meta to national politics, and particularly, for example, with Amazon. I mean, I remember back, it must have been 8 or 10 years ago, Boeing was shopping for a new headquarters. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And they had all these cities. I think Chicago was one of them. They had all these cities competing with each other, and Alabama was going to offer them $500 million, and Connecticut was going to offer them $600 million, and all this kind of stuff. And I had Bernie Sanders on the show, and I said, Bernie, what do you think of this? And he says, it's criminal. It's destructive. It's corporations ripping off state after state. And I said, what do you do about it? And he said, we should pass a law that says that any state that has, either the state government does this or any municipality or county in the state does this, any state that participates in one of these competitions to move a business from one state to another loses all their federal highway funds.
Whoa, okay, Bernie.
And it's like, that would solve a huge problem.
Yeah, that would
because it's a total race to the bottom. So anyhow, what's the deal with Amazon?
First of all, I doubt very much they'll ever pass that legislation, but I welcome it. I never heard of that anecdote before. So here, okay, by the way, Chicago was the quote-unquote winner of that Boeing sweepstakes back in, I can't remember, it was, Tom, was so long ago, I can't remember. I think it was the early O's, but whatever, don't quote me, people. So Boeing is headquartered in Chicago, so the headquarters is in Chicago. Not the jobs. And at the time, it was viewed as a great triumph for Chicago by corporate and civic Chicago and political Chicago, because it put Chicago on the map as a headquarters town. Now, I've always felt, as my worldview, is that doesn't really help anybody in Chicago who has to pay the bills to fund the government, to fund the schools, to clean the streets, to police the streets, et cetera, et cetera. That's just something like bragging rights that the corporate and civic community has. But that is sort of the mindset that drives these things, Tom, not just in Chicago, of course, but nationwide. I'm obsessed with the Chicago element to it. And so since then, since Boeing, Chicago went through a period of about 10 years where they were throwing public dollars through something called the TIF fund, which I won't bore your listeners with an explanation of that, but they've been throwing millions and millions of dollars at various corporations to move their headquarters here. And Amazon is sort of an extension of this, like on steroids, because at the moment, Chicago is one of over 200 states or cities that are wooing Amazon, trying to bribe them into coming to their city with a second headquarters. And at the moment, and I say at the moment because it's a bidding war, Chicago's and the state of Illinois' offer is at $2.25 billion.
Wow.
And that's just at the moment because, as I said, the way Amazon has staged this, they're accepting all the offers. They're going through the proposals, and then they're going to whittle it down to, I think, I don't know, maybe say 5, and then another round of negotiations, and then they'll whittle it down to 2, and then.
Right.
So anyway, so that's Bernie was absolutely right. It's madness.
Yeah. So do you? Wow, this is incredible. So what is there any kind of groundswell support for doing it or not doing it? I mean, it's kind of a catch-22, or that's the wrong metaphor, or cliche, because on the one hand, if you get a big company coming into town, they're bringing jobs, they're bringing money, they're bringing, and those jobs echo out, right? People go to work for Amazon. They hire 20,000 people. Those people are then going to eat lunch at local restaurants, and the restaurants are going to do better. They're going to buy clothes, whatever. Yeah. So there's an upside to this, but the downside is that you're handing $2.25 billion to this corporation to bring these jobs to town. And has anybody done the math on how long it takes for that to pay out? I know that there was a recent one. I think it was in Indiana, that was something like a 70 years before before the state would actually make a penny on it?
Okay, you've asked about two great questions right there. First of all, in terms of the math, there's, as far as I know, nobody's done any kind of anything resembling an objective analysis.
Shouldn't that be step one?
Yeah, that would be step one. You should be mayor of Chicago. You're already making more sense than the last two we've had. So there's usually no objective analysis. There's just press release statements put out by the mayor or his backers or the civic community. And then the second point is their groundswell of support. What we have here in Chicago, and I'm sure it's the same elsewhere, but I'm just going to concentrate in Chicago, is something like, I would call it like manufactured consent. To use another phrase, but I think it's Noam Chomsky. Anyway, the notion that you manufacture a groundswell of support.
Right.
So the leading mainstream newspapers, they're part of the chorus, say, oh my God, this is great. This is really going to help Chicago. The civic community is on board. The corporate community is on board. The mayor, Mayor Rahm Emanuel, has a list of 600 people who are welcoming Amazon, part of the team to bring Amazon to Chicago, and they're all part of corporate Chicago. And so it's just like the usual suspects are dragged out, people who are thriving in the city, and they're supposed to represent like the entire city of Chicago as though everybody was aboard. We went through the same thing, Tom, about 7 years ago or 8 years ago when we were supposedly all aboard to get the Olympics to come to town, the 2016 Olympics that went to Brazil. Big hype about how Chicago wanted the Olympics. And the reality is the overwhelming majority of people in Chicago did not want the Olympics. Polls showed this. If they had to pay for it. Well, of course you have to pay for it. No, someone's got to pay for the Olympics.
Well, and that's the whole point, whether it's the Olympics or whether it's Amazon. There's actually, it's truth. Everything that you just said is actually true. It's going to bring business. It's going to, stimulate the economy. It's going to do a lot of good things. But the question is just one of simple math. I mean, if Amazon is bringing $50 to town and we're paying them $100 to do it, we just got screwed.
You're absolutely correct. And they don't want you to do the math. This is so classic Chicago. They just go along with it, people. We'll be looking out for you. We'll be watching.
But it might be a good deal, Ben.
Yeah, it might. I remember.
Somebody should do the friggin' math.
I remember, if I could go way back, when you heard you saying that, Tom, it echoed back to me. David Letterman was interviewing Maureen Dowd. I remember this. It's funny when you said that. It just triggered this. This was, I forget how many years ago. It was at the start of the Iraqi War. Okay, and. Maureen Dowd she's a columnist for the New York Times, people.
Right.
And she was critical of the Iraqi war. This is the early days.
Sure.
And she was laying out her arguments. And David Letterman, playing devil's advocate, she goes, there's a possibility that you're wrong. He said that to her.
Yeah.
And he was just being devil's advocate. Have you considered that?
Right.
And I really can't even remember her response other than I really doubt that I'm wrong.
Right.
And so I say this to you. Yes, I could be wrong. I could be wrong. This could be a great thing for Chicago. It could result in taxes falling because Amazon's paying so much money. It could result in our city blooming.
Except they're getting a tax abatement.
Yeah, man. Except we all know it's not going to be that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So that's I'm just like, I'm a big fan of math. And it's like,
you're not going to get any math, real math out of these guys.
You would think that the Emanuel administration, if they believe this, if they think this is real, that they would crunch the numbers and put it in the front page of the paper.
No, because that's where you're living in the land of logic, and we live in the land of the illogic. So I think that's the answer.
Okay, we're talking with Ben Joravsky.
Yes, sir.
Saying it right? Ben Joravsky, who is talent on WCPT Chicago, AM 820 here from 2 to 5 every day.